And it looks like we are live. We'll give John just a second to get our Facebook group up. Looks like we are good to go. Thanks, John. Appreciate you, man. Mile high hello, everybody in Broncos country. And welcome into another episode of the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. I'm your host, Lance Sanderson, and joining me, as always, is my good friend and colleague. He's your Denver Broncos insider and Mile High Huddle's senior NFL draft analyst, the one and only Erick Trickel. Now, Erick, it's been a minute. The group chat's been kind of silent for the last few days. I haven't really had a whole lot of conversation going on between the two of us anyways. How you been, man? What's been going on?
Just been busy, man. Just trying to get everything all ready for the holidays and get that all finished up, everything with work. And then stuff for the site as well. I've been trying to get a bunch of stuff done for draft stuff for the upcoming draft and everything. And just been super busy, and enjoying life. I mean, spending time with my daughter as well, and just having a good old time, really.
Yeah, nice, man. Kind of the same on my end. Just been busy with work and stuff like that, getting ready to kind of break down some more of the Broncos games and stuff like that. We've got a really fun show for you guys planned tonight, breaking down the roster and stuff like that. Heard a very interesting question as well that I want to get your opinion on here, Erick. And also, guys, I might have technical difficulties tonight. So please, if you guys are seeing anything, just bear with us a little bit. We're trying to get a good quality show for you guys. If you do see anything crazy, just let us know. But anyways, guys, tonight we're going to be breaking down the roster. And over the course of the season, we've seen a lot of ups and downs. The injuries has been really kind of huge for this Broncos team, losing out the majority of the interior of the defensive line, Von Miller being out, Cortland Sutton being out. Now Bryce Callahan's out probably for the rest of the season with a foot injury. Philip Lindsay's missed time as well. So it's kind of hard to break down the roster as a whole and its entirety, but we can still get a pretty good idea of what the Broncos need to improve on moving into the 2021 season. And we're going to break down some different options for you guys. But first, before we get going into this, let me rack out these matters of business really fast. Guys, make sure you guys, if you're on Twitter, follow at DVDD_pod. That's the podcast account. Easiest way to keep up with what's going on with the Dove Valley Deep Divers and what we've got going on for the show. While you're at it, follow at Mile High Huddle. That's the mother account. Instant breaking news and analysis on your Denver Broncos. Film breakdowns, opinion articles, stuff like that from all of your favorite Mile High Huddle personalities. If you guys would be so kind and are in a financial position to be able to do so, head on over to huddleuppod.com. That's the merch tent. I'm a concert man. I'm not saying get your swag on. No, go grab your merch. Get yourself a hat, get yourself a t-shirt, face mask, coffee cups. There's hoodies, something for the guys, something for the gals. There's a onesie for your baby if you want to run something like that. Also, for our Facebook users, become a supporter. Go to facebook.com/milehighhuddle. Click the blue Become a Supporter button. It's an easy way to help what's going on with the Huddle Up Podcast Network and Mile High Huddle in general. And if you guys are not financially able to do so, they're not trying to pressure you to do anything like that. The three easiest things you guys can do to help support the show is wherever you're at, wherever you're watching it, wherever you're listening to this after the fact as a podcast, subscribe to Mile High Huddle. Like every video you guys see. And if you love it, share it. And the one quick thing really fast, last little quick matter of business is the shout out to our sponsor. This episode is sponsored by sportsbetting.com. Broncos country, gambling is now legal in the state of Colorado, and here's what makes sportsbetting.com a no-brainer for sports fans. They have sharp odds and low juice, and they have in-house bookmakers, meaning they're not a third-party provider of odds. That reduced juice means they have the best prices. They have hassle-free bonuses, including a one-time rollover. That means the bonus money is yours after you bet it one time, and other sites range from like 5 to 30 times, and that's not a good deal if you want to try to make money right away. They have 24/7 live customer support, and there's always a real person inside the United States. You're not talking to anybody overseas, somebody that has a crazy accent. You're not going to be able to understand them. It's always a real American in the United States ready to talk to you and help if you have any questions for their customer support system. But here's the kicker. At sportsbetting.com, you guys can get a 100% risk-free week of sports betting up to $1,000, not just one bet, but all of your bets. You play for a week, and if your losses exceed your winnings at the end of the week, sportsbetting.com will cover 100% of the difference, up to $1,000 with a one-time rollover. So guys, head on over to www.sportsbetting.com/ for a chance to get in and take advantage of this risk-free week of betting. That's www.sportsbetting.com/milehighhuddle. Now, Erick, I said at the beginning of the show that I had heard a very interesting question today. I was listening to the Stokely and Zach show on 104.3 The Fan, just for some extra content, background noise, and stuff like that. And Zach Bai actually asked a very interesting question. And it's kind of hard to preface this and make it kind of in a timely fashion for you to answer it. Drew Lock now has, 8 games this season that he's actually played the full game, not including the Pittsburgh start where he only first 5 minutes of the first quarter. But he also has 5 games from last season. So 13 total games heading into this Chiefs game. Is this the game that Drew Lock has to have that breakout game in order for him to not only secure his opportunity as the franchise quarterback in 2021, but to even be a serviceable backup? Like, if he doesn't have a good game against the Kansas City Chiefs, does it mean that these next 4 games after this game mean anything? Or is he really kind of buying this one game to make sure that these next 4 games actually mean something?
So I don't think that good performance, bad performance, I don't think that this game immediately means the last 4 games are not necessarily worthless, but not as important. But this is definitely the important game of the season, of what's left. I mean, the whole thing that the Broncos want to do is they want to be able to go in, compete for the division title, and who stands in their way? The Kansas City Chiefs. So they need Drew Lock to go out there and have a good game. I think that this would be a very heavily opinionated game for the Broncos, depending on how he does. If he goes out there and struggles, I mean, I think that it will go point towards them looking for either A, towards the draft, depending on how the rest of the season goes, or B, possibly going and getting another veteran. And a veteran, if they still want to work with Drew Lock, a veteran wouldn't be the worst way to go. I mean, I know a lot of fans, and I'm included in this, by the way, are tired of the Band-Aid going route at quarterback with Joe Flacco, Case Keenum. I understand being tired with that, but being able to get Drew Lock some extra time, because his experience that he's getting, it's not helping him. If anything, it's hurting him so far. So having a guy he can learn from and watch again potentially can help him make him better. So I think that this game is going to go a long way to deciding just how they go to better the quarterback room if they need to. If Drew Lock goes out there and kills it and the Broncos are competitive with the Chiefs with how tough this deep team is, because this defense, they're no joke either. If they're able to go out there and compete with them and Drew Lock has a great day, I think they will go a long way towards Drew Lock getting 2021 as a starter. Yeah. I mean, it's obviously it still depends on what goes on over the last 4 games of it, but this is the most important game because it's against the Chiefs. It's against the team that runs the division right now.
Yeah. The biggest thing to me in this one is I'm not necessarily looking for Drew Lock to have a game that's the Broncos are going to go out there and win. I'm not asking him to have a 400-yard performance and 4 touchdowns. What I am asking him to do is to have a good game. Like, you go back and you look at those first 13 games of his career, and I mean, the Houston Texans game, the first 3 quarters of that game were awesome. And obviously Rich Scangarello took his foot off the gas and just kind of coasted away to an easy victory there. You have the fourth quarter against the Chargers. You have the fourth quarter against the Falcons, which was kind of ho-hum more than anything. The Broncos defense put the Broncos offense in a bunch of really good situations, and Drew Lock actually fumbled that one away, throwing an interception and setting up the Falcons like the 21-yard line. They scored 2 plays later. So the majority of the time that we've watched Drew Lock over the first season and a half of his first full season, I guess we could say, of his career has been mediocre at best and really kind of downright bad. Like, honestly, let's just be real here. This next game, if he has another bad game, that's his 14th start. And if you can say that he has 7 or 8 good quarters in 14 total games, that's not the signs of a guy that you want to have as your franchise quarterback. That's like a decent backup at best. So if he has another bad game, 3/4 of his professional career has been bad football. These next 4 games, he'd have to have those 400-yard games, those 4 touchdown games with no interceptions for the rest of those next 5 games. Like, period. That's just how it's going to have to be.
He'd have to be not perfect, but near perfect over those last
damn near, yeah,
to make up for it. Because as James says in the chat, he says the Chiefs are ultimately the benchmark that the Broncos need to aspire to. And that is true. I mean, they can't sit there. They're not going to be able to contend for a Super Bowl. They're not going to be able to contend for the division. And they're going to have a rough time contending for the playoffs if they don't get more consistent quarterback play and they're not able to, at the very least, contend with the Kansas City Chiefs. That's what it comes down to. It's all going to be about what Drew Lock does. And I know we've gotten a lot of hate for being super negative about it, but it's really hit that point where he either steps up and shows that he can be the guy, or he continues as it is, and the questions still remain. And if those questions still remain, you can't roll with him as your quarterback in 2021. That's what it comes down to. He's got these last 5 games, but this Kansas City Chiefs game, since they are the benchmark that you are looking at, needs to be a good one.
And that's absolutely right, man. The Broncos have not beat the Chiefs since week 2 of 2015. That was before they won the Super Bowl. 10 straight losses to the Kansas City Chiefs. And not only that, they're not competitive within the division anyways this year. You can erase the Chargers game, just plain and simple. The Broncos won that game, and Drew Lock was fantastic in the last, 18 minutes of game time. That's fine. They were down 21 points for a reason, guys. This team is not necessarily great. They're not very competitive within their own division, and you have to be able to compete within your division. They've got waxed by the Chiefs for the last 10 times they've played. They've been waxed by the Raiders a handful of times as well over the last 5 years. Like, this team it comes down to the biggest thing. Can Drew Lock make this team competitive against the division? And this is another division game against his hometown team. He's struggled the last 2 times he's played them. Yeah, there was some snow and some other mitigating factors in that. But still, at the same time, his play over the first 13 games of his career has been lackluster at best. Like, if you're not going to be able to compete and remain competitive, at least be close in the fourth quarter against the Chiefs this week, that brings out even more questions. Like, honestly. And Alex Scott comes in here, and he actually makes a pretty decent point, and it's one that we're kind of getting at here. That's the wrong one. I jumped on me really fast. He says, I think if Drew struggles, we need to get some competition at that position. And Eric, I think you as well, agree with that 100%. Now, the big question about Locke in the Chiefs game and the importance of that, and if he has a bad or a good game, it really kind of depends on the rest of the season, what the Broncos are going to do here. If he does have a good game and he does have some success over the next 5 games of the season leading out to close it out, the Broncos win a couple of games, they'll be picking in the 6 to 12 range. If that is to happen and you still have all these questions, what direction are you looking?
Well, first I want to get to this just because it involves about Drew Lock. Maybe our OC just sucks. And here's the thing is, if your offensive coordinator is failing, and I don't think Pat Shurmur is as big of an issue as many others do, when you watch Drew Lock and he plays within the scheme, Drew Lock plays fine. It's when he doesn't do basically the simple things that you want your quarterback to do that he struggles. And that isn't on the offensive coordinator. But if you want to fire the offensive coordinator, that means you're changing at quarterback as well. Because you're not going to go 3 years with Drew Lock as your quarterback or as your future guy, and 3 years and going back to college even longer than that of a new offense that he's got to learn, a new offensive coordinator he's got to learn the different techniques for and everything like that, because each coordinator, each coach, they have things that they teach you just a little bit differently. So if you want to change at offensive coordinator, you're getting a change at quarterback. If you don't want to change at quarterback, you're not going to get a change at offensive coordinator. That's just what it comes down to. Now, as for your question, if they land in that 6 to 12 range, where Drew Lock, to me, Drew Lock shows enough to still sit there and be worked with and potentially be the guy down the road. It's the Band-Aid route. The Band-Aid quarterback, somebody to come in and compete with him, to push him, to strive him, somebody he can learn from. Now, in free agents, there's not many. Dak Prescott, he's just going to end up tagged by the Dallas Cowboys at the very least. They're not letting him go. Jacoby Brissett, all right, what he's done with the Colts, it's been very hit or miss. Not sure Pat Shurmur can really make him better, but maybe it's a guy that can go and not help Drew Lock develop, but a guy to push Drew Lock. Jameis Winston, same thing. He's not a guy that I don't think anyways that you're going to go and make him better and whatnot. And then trades, Alex Smith, maybe he's an option there. Matt Stafford, Matt Ryan, they're a little bit longer odds for it. Sam Darnold, he's the guy to watch. I mean, he was the one that was he was big on John Elway was big on Sam Darnold prior to the draft. And so I think those things that could be here. And just real quick, John Ager says, so I turned in and see we're still hung up on the Drew Lock is trash. It's annoying. Who's a better option at the moment? We're not saying Drew Lock is trash. That's not what we're saying. If that's what you're coming away, then you're not listening to fully what we're saying. is we're not saying Drew Lock is trash. We're saying that he has a bunch of issues that need to be worked on. Whether he works on them or not, that'll determine if he's trash or not. Better option at the moment, there isn't one. And we're not saying you bench Drew Lock now. Not once have we ever said you bench Drew Lock this year, which goes to another question that we had earlier from, I think, Richie. Let me see if I can't find it. Says, now here's the bigger question for me. If Drew messes up, do we bring in Brett and see if he plays better than Drew? No, because we saw Brett ripping in the Jets game, and he's not the option either. Those 3 interceptions he threw were terrible. And I understand that a lot of people think you deserve more time. Brett Rippon, he went undrafted for a reason. First of all, he's very limited with his arm. He's not able to make all those throws. Jerry Jeudy bailed him out on what would have been a 4th interception. Well, game total of 4 interceptions because he didn't place the ball properly. He couldn't put enough oomph underneath it to place it in front of him. And Jerry Jeudy had to turn around and made a fantastic catch and get it. Brett Rippon's not the guy. He's not a guy. He's not getting considered for that. At best, he's getting considered for that smart backup, that Kellen Moore type guy. So I don't think that if Drew Lock struggles, I don't think you pull him out. No, I think you still continue to roll with Drew Lock and see if he can start putting it together. See if he can have that magic that he had at the end of that 4th quarter, or at the end of the game against the Chiefs or the Chargers in that 4th quarter, and see if he can start turning that into consistency. See if he can build upon that Miami Dolphins game, playing within the scheme, not doing too much that he's not being asked to do. You don't move on from, you don't bench Drew Lock this year. He has the rest of the season, provided he doesn't get hurt.
And I 100% agree with that, Eric. I totally am in lockstep, share a brain there. I'm not saying that you're going to bench Drew Lock by any stretch of the imagination. It's the question of moving to the future. And the like you said, the better option right now is Drew Lock just puts it together and becomes a franchise quarterback. That's the better option. That's the one that I want to happen. Like, I love Drew Lock. And DNV3 came in and asked what would happen if Drew Lock was picked in the first round. That is the whole variable in this situation. Drew Lock was a 2nd-round pick. And the Broncos, they're tied to him because he's a 2nd-round pick, and they don't want to have another 2nd-round failure, which is why you want to have Drew Lock succeed. If he was a 1st-round pick, that buys him that extra year. You have that opportunity. It's a major investment in the guy. And he may not have shown the growth. You can also give the excuses or the reasons or whatever you want to say. He gets that extra year. Look at Mitch Trubisky. He's gotten how much time because the Bears traded up for him and made him the number 2 overall pick. He's been god-awful the entire time that he's been a Chicago Bear, the entire time he's been in the league. But they continue to give him chance after chance after chance because he's a 1st-round pick. That's a major investment. Drew Lock is, they traded up in the 2nd round to go get him, but a 2nd-round pick is a lot different than the number 2 overall pick. Or even say the Broncos took him at number 10 overall. Number 10 overall, you're going to give him every opportunity that he can have, and you're going to guarantee that he's going to have 2021. Well, now the Broncos are not in a very good position. Like, honestly, sitting at 4-7, it's more likely that they pick in the top 10 than they pick in the teens. Like, quite honestly, given the play of and the injuries and everything that's going on right now, and with the play that Drew Lock has shown up to this point, the Broncos are much more likely to be picking in the top 10, plain and simple. And that's where that's why we're having this conversation. If Drew Lock fails, where do the Broncos turn? If he does succeed, what other options do they have?
And this is actually a point because it goes into that of that being that 1st-round pick is you would have cut Elway as a rookie. No, he wouldn't have because Elway was that 1st-round pick. And on top of that, Elway offered a lot more with his legs and his mobility than Drew Lock does. That's the thing. And we talked about this last week or the week before and everything like that is there's other factors that go into this. Drew Lock, he's not that threat with his legs to help him buy more time. Additionally, Elway was the 1st overall pick, right?
He was number 1 overall. And
they traded for him. So that right there, that gets you more time. Being the 42nd overall pick, you don't get awarded that time. On top of that is John Elway was a 2-7 team that he went to in his rookie year or something like that, and they ended up doing quite a bit better. And then his 2nd year, he went 13-3. He showed that progress you needed to year 2.
Yep.
Drew Lock is in his 2nd year because he doesn't have 16 starts doesn't mean that he's not in his 2nd year.
Yep.
And different era. That's a whole other point. Peyton Manning, different era. all that stuff also plays into a factor. But it comes down to the fact is that Drew Lock just hasn't shown the progress that he needs to in year 2, because that's what this is. This is year 2. It's not year 1 still. Saying that he's still in his rookie year is taking away from everything else that he got last year.
Yeah. Thank you, Alvin, for the reminder there. We're going to move this conversation forward, guys, because we've been trying to avoid the conversation with Drew Lock, but it has to be it's a topic that needs to be discussed. It really is. And we're tired of being called haters, and we're tired of being like this narrative about us that we don't like Drew Lock, we want him to fail, or no, that's not true. I'm tired of having that. But the fact of the matter is this is where the Broncos are at right now. Like that's what is the topic at hand.
If Drew Lock was performing, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
That's a very fair point, Eric, and that's the ultimate point. Now, I wanted to talk about some draft quarterbacks really quick. If the Broncos were picking in the top 5, potentially, what are some guys? Obviously, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields. Teach me about Zach Wilson, though.
Zach Wilson is one of my guys. To me right now, I think he's right there for number 2. I like Justin Fields. I have a lot of concerns about him. Trevor Lawrence, he's the number 1 guy. I don't think anybody's going to move him off there. Trey Lance, very toolsy. I wish there was a little bit more refinement there as a quarterback. But I'm trying not to rate that this year. Just the raw physical traits that he has. Because after Paxton Lynch, at least personally, I feel like I started to overrate not having that refinement as a quarterback, which is one reason why I was a lot lower on Josh Allen, even though he couldn't hit the side of a battleship if he was standing on it. But I don't want to do that with Trey Lance, because those physical traits that he has are great. But that refinement, I mean, he has, for as big of an arm as he has some issues hitting those deep balls. Someone related to Drew Lock there. So I have these concerns. So Zach Wilson, he's the guy I'm looking at. I think that he can sit there and really, what's the word? I don't think he's super scheme dependent, I guess would be one way to put it. Although I think that there are schemes that definitely fit him better. And that's why I like him. He's smart. He's got good athleticism. There are some placement issues. There are some decision-making issues, but he can be a threat with his legs as well, even though he only uses that if needed. It's not what he looks to do. So I really like him. He can make all the throws. His arm isn't the greatest, but it's good enough. And in the NFL anymore, is you don't have to have a super great arm all the time. You just needed to be good enough. Peyton Manning's was good enough. Tom Brady's was good enough. I mean, obviously, Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, Brett Favre, those guys have great arms, but so do multiple other quarterbacks. There's more to it than that. So I like Zach Wilson. I think he has all the tools that he has, and he reminds me, and DMV says Wilson reminds him of Locke, and I don't see that at all. I think that they are two very, very different quarterbacks. I think that Drew Lock, when he was coming out, there's a lot of questions about his intelligence, and that's not the case with Wilson. I'd be concerned with some issues with as well with the injury he suffered, and then with how poor his performance was. But I mean, it's the Joe Burrow effect. I mean, look what Joe Burrow, the year before, people were talking about him as a 5th, 6th undrafted round pick or undrafted guy, and same thing with Zach Wilson. And so he's just showing this improvement that you need to.
Yeah, that's a good point and really good stuff there, man. I appreciate that. We got a question here, and I'm going to kind of change our lineup here because Stephen Baumgartner comes in, and this is an interesting topic. And talking about the offensive lineman, Alex Leatherwood, I believe the left tackle for Alabama right now, would he be a good pick for Denver? Now, this is an interesting conversation in and of itself because you got to kind of take into consideration what the Broncos have going on in 2021. This is a conversation about 2021, guys. Juan James obviously is not playing this year. He opted out because of CV and everything like that. He chose his personal health and safety, which I commend the guy. Do what you think is necessary. I appreciate that. He's played like 66 total snaps in 2018 after signing that, or 2019, excuse me, after signing that massive, huge deal. So everyone wants to call him a waste of a contract. He's just costing the Broncos money. Well, yes and no. The thing is, Juwan James doesn't cost the Broncos a damn red cent this year. They're paying him a little stipend, more or less, to continue on, so he has some income coming in his way. Not that he necessarily needs it, but I digress there. When he opted out, his money, his contract, essentially just skipped a season. So it's null and void for this year. So he doesn't affect the Broncos at all. So that means next year, his $19 million cap hit is going to be on the books. Juwan James is your starting right tackle next year, barring him being a walking hangnail away from sitting down for the next 6 games. Regardless, when he's on the field, Juwan James is actually one of the best pass protecting right tackles in the game. He's a very, very good pass protector. DeMar Dotson has played well. I'm not going to say he's been elite by any stretch of the imagination. He hasn't played great, but he's been good enough to keep Drew Lock, the rest of Broncos quarterbacks, upright for the most part. Really needs to work on his run blocking. Athletic DeMar Dotson, quite honestly, if you ask my opinion on that. But if you're going to spend a pick on like an Alex Leatherwood, you're really banking that as a contingency plan that Juwan James is not going to be the guy, because let's not forget, guys, Garrett Bowles just got a 4-year, $68 million contract extension. He is your left tackle of the future for the next 4 years, like for the most part anyways. So if you're taking Alex Leatherwood, first off, you're probably going to be you're trading down if you're going to be in the first round. More likely, you're going to be a second-round pick there, and you're basing that as a contingency that Juwan James is not your guy, and you're using that as a future pick. In my opinion, if the Broncos are going to go and draft an offensive tackle, it needs to be a developmental guy, someone that's going to have a 2 to 3 year window as like a 3rd or 4th round pick, because that second round pick is a starter. You want that guy to be an impact player immediately, and Alex Leatherwood is not going to be that guy.
Yeah, there's issues when people scream offensive line when talking about the draft, because the Broncos, they have their starting lineup for 2021. They do have issues with depth and past and post 2021. But I mean, even then, they hope Dalton Reisner is their left guard. They just signed Garrett Bowles. They hope Lloyd Cushenberry is their center. And they have Moody, who they hope to be their right guard and replace Glasgow. So all they need is that right tackle. And I think that's a good place for Leatherwood. I liked him a lot last year. His decision to return bothered me a little bit. I understood why he did, but he didn't take those steps forward that he needed to. A lot of his play this year has been very similar to how he played last year. A lot of the same mistakes, not the needed development that you need to. Funny. You always want to see development from players after year. But I think that in the NFL, he might be a little bit better at guard. So if Nathaniel Moody, if they're looking at him as just being a depth guy, then Alex Leatherwood I think would be a good pick. You can try him out at right tackle, see how he does, and then you can move him inside if he fails and replace Graham Glasgow. Now, I saw in the chat somebody mentioned about moving Juwan James to right guard and Glasgow to center and then drafting right tackle, and that's just a terrible idea. Juwan James, he's not a guard. He doesn't have the traits to be a guard. He doesn't have anything to be a guard. It's not as simple as, oh, hey, let's move him inside. They got to have the traits to do it. They've got to be able to play there, and that's not everybody has that. It's just like not every offensive tackle has the capability of playing both sides. Jake Rogers, that preseason last year, he did all right at right tackle. He going over to left tackle, and he just completely bombed because he didn't have the technique down for the left side, because you have to flip the technique. Same to guard and center. You don't have to flip the technique, but your technique changes a little bit. What's needed of you changes a little bit. That's not Juwan James. Juwan James isn't a guard. Juwan James is a tackle-only player, and maybe Denver decides to keep him around as a swing tackle, whatever, but next year he's going to be your starting right tackle because of how much money he's owed. Odds are, well, I shouldn't say he will be. Odds are he will be. I don't think they find this guy to start over him and have him be a backup swing tackle. I don't think they'll try to justify that financially anyways. But there are plenty of other tackles, and I saw somebody else mention Daniel Fa'alele out there. And this was a good question as well. Other than the Oregon kid, is there a tackle who's worth spending a top 15 pick on? Right now, I don't think there is, but there are a couple guys who are close to it. I think Dylan Radins out of North Dakota State and Christian Darrisaw out of Virginia Tech. They're right there on the border. For me, they're not quite – they're right around 20 for me for where I'd be comfortable taking them. And the issue is with Dylan Radins is that he doesn't have any other games to show up what he can do. I believe he was invited to the Senior Bowl, though, so that could be a help there. And then Christian Darrisaw, it's just a matter, I think, of how well he tests athletically. I think some team will overrate that, and I think he will end up a top 15 pick because he is a gifted athlete that just has to get the game turned around for him and everything. But Daniel Fa'alele, big fan of his. He's a guy that I would take in the second round. He's a very much that developmental tackle guy. Big, powerful, can move very well. Not the best mover, which granted at 6'8", 400 pounds, you're not going to be a fantastic mover. But he does it well enough. I think that like a Trent Brown type future is his ceiling for him. I would definitely love him. I think that he'd be a great fit in the Broncos scheme. Right now, obviously that could change depending on what the scheme is going forward. But those are just a couple guys. Rashawn Slater, I talked about him with Nick Kendall on Twitter the other day. He's a guy that can play multiple positions. Samuel Cosme, that's a guy that is one of Lance's guy. I'm not as high on him. Jalen Mayfield, and then Jackson Carman, Spencer Brown. Those are all other guys that I'd be looking at in that second round. Although Jalen Mayfield, I've heard a lot of chatter that he can be going in that late first. A little bit early for me, but I still have to do a lot more work on him.
Yeah, I know you really like that Jackson Carman, the Clemson kid, right? I think so. Did I break up, Eric? Can you hear me?
What was that?
The Jackson Carman, Clemson kid. That's another kid that
Clemson
I know
left
you like
tackle,
a
yes.
lot. Yep. Okay.
Yes.
Zach Lee Butler coming in here on Super Chat. Is there a real 3-down freak athlete, Devin White, Quan Alexander type to draft in the first round? And will Elway actually pull the trigger? Now, let's move this conversation forward, honestly. You've got the linebacker position, which is another one that we wanted to talk about. And Stephen Baumgartner, I'm not sure if you have my notes for today's show, but you've pretty much nailed everything that we want to talk about today. Coverage linebacker for Vic Fangio's defense is a big need. I kind of broke this down last week on the show as far as what the Broncos could do against Taysom Hill and the New Orleans Saints, as far as what the coverage linebackers' responsibilities were within Vic Fangio's defense. It's very, very linebacker heavy. Like, you have to have quality coverage linebackers. Justin Strnad coming back next year healthy. That's going to be a big ticket item for the Broncos defense. But still, Alexander Johnson is more of a gap-filling linebacker. He does do decently in coverage. Josie Jewell, not quite athletic enough. He's more of a see and chase kind of a guy. And it's just the Broncos do need to upgrade their coverage linebackers. Now, is there a coverage linebacker in this draft? Because I'm not seeing anybody on the free agent wire that the Broncos are going to be able to go and get. Speak to the Broncos being able to draft a coverage linebacker somewhere, I would say, in the first 2 rounds if they had the opportunity to.
So the issue is the top 2 linebackers, Micah Parsons and Dylan Moses, they both have their concerns. So Micah Parsons, what he showed last year was really good run defense, really good blitzer, okay in limited coverage. And this year everybody was saying, okay, he's got to take that step forward in coverage. And then he opted out. And he wasn't able to show the improvements in coverage that he needed to. This has led many scouts that I've talked to believe that he's more of an edge. I view him as a Kyle Van Noy, Jamie Collins type. Limited coverage role, really good against the run, really good blitzer. Alexander Johnson. That if Denver decides to let Alexander Johnson walk, I believe he's a restricted free agent. If he gets offered another deal and they let him go, then Micah Parsons makes more sense because that's a good role for him to fill. Micah Parsons has a lot of concerns in coverage. That's the big concern with him. With opting out, you're not going to see that improvement. And I think that a lot of people don't realize how much concern there is with him in coverage. He's very tight. He's not very fluid. And he does a lot. He doesn't do well at moving back. Now, Dylan Moses, I think he has a lot more upside in coverage. I think that he is a very smart player. I think he knows everything that he needs to do. But I think he overthinks things. Watching him, it seems like he's a little hesitant because he's just overthinking it and just brings some issues with his play about that. I like him a lot. I think that he is closer to being a true 3-down linebacker than Micah Parsons is. But I think that the issues that he has, especially when he gets blockers on him, are concerns that will keep him from being the top off-ball linebacker. Looks like Lance is still broken up. So there are a couple other linebackers as well in this draft. I mean, Chaz Surratt, he's a guy who I like a lot. He's still learning the position. He's a guy who's shown pretty well in coverage when he's needed to. Tony Fields, I know James Campbell, when we talk privately, he's talked about him a lot. I think that he can do pretty well in the Josie Jewell type role, the see and chase, and trying to avoid blockers and make a play. When blockers get on Tony Fields, to me, he's getting taken out of the play. Garrett Wallow out of TCU, I think that he has probably one of the highest upsides for a coverage linebacker. He's a guy I like a lot to be a coverage linebacker in the NFL. I think he's going to have a lot of concerns against the run. Again, taking on blockers. A lot of times when you see guys that are really good in coverage, they have this issue with taking on blockers against the run game. They're very Brandon Marshall-like. Brandon Marshall, when Danny Trevathan was in Denver, Danny Trevathan would take on blocks. Brandon Marshall, he'd what we call sort through the trash. He'd avoid blockers, chase, and make a play. So that's another guy there. Sorry, guys. Lance is having technical difficulties. Nick Bolton, he's the guy that I think can do pretty well in the Josie Jewell type role. I don't think he offers up as much in coverage as some of these other guys, but I think that he can improve over Josie Jewell there. My concern is that he doesn't have much length. And Zach Lee Butler comes in with the $1.99 donation. Thank you, Zach. We appreciate that. He says, will that linebacker take this D to elite status? I don't think that any of the linebackers, Micah Parsons, Dylan Moses, I don't think any of these guys really bring this defense to elite status. I think that they have enough of other concerns to really keep that from happening. But, I mean, they can be a big part in having that happen. One big issue that I have with this defense is that Denver, that over the years, their way that they built it has been by going with veterans. So it's a little bit older, and I want to see some young guys and youth, and that's going to take some time for them to get that chemistry built, because on the defense, chemistry is very important about it. And then I'm not going to try to pronounce his name. Jeremiah, I believe is his first name, out of Notre Dame. Terrible at pronouncing names, and I will butcher it. I like him, but I think, again, this is one that the scheme's going to matter. I don't think that the scheme Vic Fangio runs is a good fit for him. I think he's a guy that he's going to be a traditional will and a more 4-3 look. And while Vic Fangio's defense is technically a 4-3 under or 4-3 over, depending on how you want to look at it, they don't have a traditional will. And I think that's where Owusu Karamoa or something like that. I can't even think of his name off the top of my head, and I apologies for that. But I think that's the role that he fits in perfectly for. And that's just not with Denver. This is a really good linebacker class overall. There's plenty of talent top to bottom in it. But a lot of guys this year, when I've been studying them, one note that I've been consistently making is that certain scheme. One guy that I like, who is to me is kind of a poor man, Micah Parsons, that guy that can play in the right role in Vic Fangio's defense, is Merlin Robertson, who can kind of be that edge, and he can kind of be that Jimmy Collins, Kyle Van Noy type player. And again, just with Alexander Johnson in Denver, I just don't see a fit for that. Lance, you're back.
Yeah, sorry about that, guys. I'm not exactly sure what just happened there. My computer just decided it was going to turn off and then restart for no reason. So apologies for the technical difficulties. Like I said, guys, just bear with me. I am trying to be at least as good of a host as I possibly can. Eric, I missed a lot of what you just said there, so apologies for that. Yeah, you just obviously got done talking about the linebackers. What about Chaz Surratt?
Real quick, I just want to say this. Mr. Boggins asks, he say Fangio 4-3. Yes, technically, Vic Fangio's defense is a 4-3 under, just as Wade Phillips was. Technically, which all that means is that the only difference is that their other defensive end is in a 2-point stance and a 3-point stance. That's the only difference. When you look at how they're aligned, technically, when you're looking at them, is your will linebacker in Vic Fangio's defense is actually Alexander Johnson. Your Mike is Josie Jewell. And then your Sam would be Von Miller, Malik Reed, whoever's on that side. Right now it's Malik Reed. And then Bradley Chubb is your other fourth down defensive lineman in a 2-point stance. That's technically Vic Fangio's defense. It's the same thing as Wade Phillips.
Yeah. Anyways, let's see here. Where was I at? Okay. Chaz Surratt. Did you speak about Chaz Surratt at all? The linebacker. Okay. I appreciate that. How about Micah Parsons? I know we had a long list of Micah Parsons here. Joshua Garzanidi and is actually the one that said Micah Parsons as far as an athletic coverage linebacker. You kind of debunked that myth. Now, Eric, you actually have kind of a different take on Micah Parsons. This is going to move into our next position group the Broncos need to address in the edge defender position. Von Miller obviously has that big contract, and the Broncos they have an out right now, and if they want to try to restructure him, they can. And there's an opportunity for them to get out from underneath Von Miller's contract this year with little dead money hit. Not that that's something that I would want to see the Broncos actually do. They also have Jeremiah Tauchi, who's an unrestricted free agent. Bradley Chubb is going into year 4 next year as well. Malik Reed, as you just got done talking about, undrafted free agent. has been playing at least decently in a rotational role. Edge is actually a big need for this Broncos team. It's kind of a sneaky need, one of the ones that you don't really often think about because everyone's like, oh, well, Von Miller's going to be back next year. Well, Von Miller might not be back next year. And if Von Miller is not back, Edge jumps to the number 2 need behind actually finding out Drew Lock is the quarterback of the future. It might be the
number 2 no matter what.
Because
even if Von Miller is back, you got to look ahead towards life after Von Miller.
Yep.
Bradley Chubb, he hasn't been the same. I mean, he's had 2 good games this season, but I understand he's coming back from an injury. But that was a second injury to that knee, so you have some concerns there. Malik Reed, he's doing all right. He's not doing great. He has 1 good quality sack on the season, and then Von Miller's aging, coming back from an injury. Like, it's a big need.
Yeah, it is a big need, and the Broncos, depending on where they're at, they have an opportunity to go out and get an absolute athletic freak, Gregory Rousseau, out of the University of Miami. The guy, long, lengthy, super strong, athletic freak, bends around very well, uses speed to power. Eric, speak about Gregory Rousseau for a minute.
Has all the physical traits, a little bit football raw.
Yeah.
And the big thing is that he relies on those traits, so it would become on the defensive coaches, the coordinator, and the edge coach to develop them. And I think you can do some work with Bill Kohler as well, because you can really line him up inside too and see him just wreck things. Really like his upside. I think he's got the highest upside. I don't want to put him on the same tier as Joey Bosa and all of them, but I don't think he's far behind it. I think if he was a little bit more, had just a little bit more refinement as a football player, that he would probably be there. But this edge class is insane. It is nuts. If they all come out in this draft, it would just super insane. So on top of Gregory Rousseau, you have Joseph Osai, you have Jason Owe, you have Kwity Paye, you have Carlos Basham, you have Shaka Toney, Victor Demukage, Aziz Ojulari, Majai Sanders, Patrick Jones, Joe Tyron, Zion Tipwalla, and Jamar Watson. Jamar Watson, I think, is being slept on. Just a lot of guys, a lot of talent, and that's not even all of them either. Those are just guys that I like the most for Vic Fangio's defense. Osai, he's that guy who he's a little bit raw in coverage, but you can drop him there. He's a really good run defender. Has really good development as a pass rusher. Jason Owe, dude's a freak of nature athletically.
Yep.
David Feldman, he does his freak list every year, and Jason Owe made it because he is said to run a 4.3, like 4.34, I think 40 at Penn State at 6'5", 260 pounds. Dude is a freak. If he runs anything close to that at the combine, dudes are going in the first round. Kwity Paye, I have a little bit concerned about him as a edge setter against the run. He does really well when stepping around blocks, but sometimes when taking them on, he kind of gets washed off a little bit. Carlos Basham, I haven't done work on him extensively yet. I know that he has some pretty good technique there, and I think that he's more of a traditional 4-3 defensive end. And I think if you were taking him, then that would be a bad sign for Bradley Chubb. And I think we're really looking at replacing Von Miller, the more athlete guy. And it's the same thing with Toney, as that Victor Demukage. I think that he's kind of closer, a better version of Malik Reed. Malik Reed, as Demukage has some issues setting the edge against the run, which that's Malik Reed. Teams will often try to get a blocker on him. He can do all right. Reed does stepping around them, which again, that's Demukage. That same kind of thing there. Ojulari, very light. I mean, I have a concern that because he plays about 245 pounds. I'd like to see him add about 10 pounds without losing his speed and burst. Majai Sanders, again, a lot of good athletes. Zion Tipwalla, I think he's a guy. He's only a redshirt sophomore out of Washington, 280 pounds, and the dude he's just a freak athlete. I mean, it's just amazing watching him play. Jamar Watson, he's a guy who he can kind of be that off ball, that Justin Hollins type player, Leonard Floyd type that Vic Fangio likes to have.
Yeah. Now, going to the NFL free agent wire here, I got pulled up 3-4 outside linebackers and 4-3 defensive ends. If you're looking for an athletic type of a guy, Leonard Floyd, speaking of, is actually available. Probably not the most elite athlete, but actually has some pretty good athleticism to him. But the one guy that I'm really kind of looking at here, Tyus Bowser from the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens actually have 3 really good edge defenders hitting the free agent wire. He's a guy that you're probably going to see them want to retain. But Tyus Bowser is a very intriguing scheme fit to me in Vic Fangio's defensive scheme. They also have Matt Judon, who I predict that they're going to bring back, and then Pernell McPhee is a 33-year-old free agent. He's probably going to see the door on his way out of Baltimore as well. Another very intriguing one here is former Bronco Shaquille Baron is a free agent after the Buccaneers spent the franchise tag on him. Is there a potential possibility that we see Shaquille Barrett for a Von Miller swap out there? Big contract for big contract?
No, at the very least, I think that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I think they'll tag him again and try to work even harder at getting a deal done. They have a better idea of what he is now, instead of being that 1-year wonder. They know he's a very capable pass rusher. I don't think he's having the best of years though. 1 second, let me pull that up because I'm trying to. I know he's got some sacks. Let's see here. 2, 3, 4, 5. So he's got 6 sacks, it looks like, on the season, which obviously it's not as big as last year, but again, it's very capable. So I think that Shaq Barrett would be a guy that they would look at tagging again, or at least trying to get a deal done.
Yeah, and it would make sense. I mean, show some love to the guy that just led the league in sacks last year. I mean, yeah, he had to do a prove-it year this year, and that's why they franchise tagged him. He's still playing at a pretty decent level. His strength against the run is actually a lot better again this year. He's improved in the run dramatically once again. There's actually a really good question here from Richie Rich, and he says, do we want an edge rusher or a legit rusher up the gut, a.k.a. do we think that an edge guy would be more important for us, like a Vaughn replacement, or a rushing defensive tackle or a nose tackle? And this one, I'm going to take the reins on here. The Broncos got dealt a huge blow. Obviously, we all know the injury issues. Shelby Harris is going to come back off of the CV list this week. It sounds like he's going to be good to go to play this week. Obviously, Mike Purcell with a big knee injury, I think is what it was. Whatever it was, yeah. Big injury that he had, missing some time since the Kansas City game a few weeks ago. Jarrell Casey was projected to be a big guy in this defensive rotation as well. He's been out since pretty much the beginning of the season. Now, there's a lot of veterans there, and I can understand the want and the need to upgrade that position. It's definitely a very viable one. Without going through some of the lists, the names on the list, I would really love to be able to get someone that could be able to do that. However, Jarrell Casey is a prime candidate for a restructure this year. He has no guaranteed money left on his deal. If you can extend him, drop his cap hit just a little bit with a signing bonus, and give him some guaranteed money, see if you can run it back with him. Shelby Harris is another one I think the Broncos need to try to retain, as well as Justin Simmons. We'll get to that here in just a few minutes. But Eric, is there anybody? Are you looking towards the defensive tackle class already this year?
Yeah, I mean, definitely you would always look to add it. And the thing with defensive tackle is I think edge is more important to answer the question than interior defensive line rusher, because you drafted Draymond Jones and McTelvin Agim to be those guys. And with defensive line, a lot of people fail to realize this, that it typically takes about 1.5 to 2 years for them to really come into their own. So Draymond Jones, we're starting to see him come into his own a little bit. So that's a good sign there, and he's got to take that step forward. McTelvin Agim, hopefully next year, we're able to see him take that step forward.
Yeah.
And it's the thing, it's defensive line. That's one of the positions you always try. Once you get it at strength, you do whatever you can to keep it at strength. I don't think Shelby Harris will be back. I don't think DeMarcus Walker will be back. So I think that you got to look at it. I think Jason Twyman, I think Davion Nixon out of Iowa. There's definitely multiple guys that can go in and bring in on this. Christian Barmore. Marvin Wilson, I think, is a little bit more of a 0-1 technique in Vic Fangio's front. And with Mike Purcell, who they brought in who they extended and everything, I think that they kind of have that role set up. I mean, and for what they use him for, I mean, it was a good deal and it was a good extension. It's a good, not great interior defensive line class. They could definitely be helped with some underclassmen declaring. But yeah, there's some guys definitely that I'm looking at and keeping an eye on, because they just fit. Jason Twyman, again, he's one guy. Or Twyman, I'm not sure how you say his last name. He's one guy that I really like for Vic Fangio's defense.
Is that a Pittsburgh kid? I think.
Yeah, Pittsburgh.
Yep. Okay.
That Pittsburgh defense, by the way, is extremely
spectacular, man.
Patrick Jones, Rashad Weaver,
Paris Ford,
Mark Hamler. or DeMar Hamlin, Jalen Twinman, and they have a linebacker that's pretty solid too. That I think is only a sophomore, might be a redshirt sophomore. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Zach Lee Butler coming in here on Super Chat. Shaq Barrett was a miss in the front office. Yes and no. Shaq Barrett wanted to have the opportunity to start, and he was not going to come back to the Broncos because they had Bradley Chubb and Von Miller. He wanted to go and try to find a role where he could start. He overestimated his value on the free agent market and ended up signing a team-friendly deal in Tampa Bay last year, where then he led the league in sacks. And yeah, you can look at it in hindsight, but he was never coming back to the Broncos. It wasn't a miss by the Broncos at all. They wrung that towel dry. They got everything they could out of Shaq Barrett and developed him. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were also, they were just fortunate enough to be able to get him. And James Campbell actually comes in here and says that Malik Reed has tenders to come. Though the Broncos went out and they got Malik Reed to replace Shaq Barrett. And I know it sounds crappy to say it like that, but they knew Shaquille Barrett wasn't coming back. They went out and they found a guy, and they got a pretty decent one in Malik Reed. He has a restricted free agent tender to come. He might have an exclusive rights free agent tender. The Broncos are going to have him for RFA in 2022. So they don't have he's still under contract for next season. They don't have to worry about that. It's a quality depth rusher to have. Hopefully Von Miller comes back. Maybe if Von Miller doesn't come back, they get a Rosso, they get a Kwity Payet, they get a Jason Oweh, someone like that in the draft. They can also go out and get a Ryan Kerrigan if they wanted to. He's a free agent. Tyus Bowser is another one that I just mentioned earlier. So, Shaq Barrett, that was a miss by the front office in hindsight because they didn't extend him, but he was never going to come back here in the first place, so it doesn't really matter.
But what Chase Waldner says, would anybody have guessed that?
No.
And here's an additional factor to that. Is Shaq Barrett is most comfortable rushing off the left side of the defense against that right tackle. That's where Von Miller lines up at. They wanted him back as depth behind Von Miller, and he wanted a chance to start. He wasn't getting that. They weren't going to – and then drafting Bradley Chubb, I guess that's the only way, but he wasn't comfortable rushing on that side. So he wasn't getting looked at to be the starter over there because of that, because he wasn't comfortable with it. So – they decided not to. They tried to bring him back. He decided he wanted to go somewhere to start. He signed a deal where he could go and compete to be a starter. And Shaq Barrett, despite how well he looked, he showed plenty of issues too. That's why he didn't get a big deal. That's why the deal that he got from Tampa Bay was a 1-year prove-it deal to try to come in and compete to be a starter. He wasn't given the starting job. He just had a chance to compete for it. And he ended up winning it and having a great season, and the rest is history.
Yeah. That's true. Well, let's get away from this. We only have a few minutes left, guys. And Alex Scott, there's been a couple of different questions here coming in here. One about Justin Simmons, specifically. Stephen Baumgartner was asking about the cornerbacks. So let's just hammer this out in 2 versus 1. Good cornerbacks and safeties in the draft or in free agency. And now this is a big one with me because obviously the Justin Simmons situation, I do see the Broncos retaining him. That's probably going to be a big reason as to why Shelby Harris is not going to be a Bronco next year. I would like to see Shelby Harris on the team as well, but he's probably going to go out and get way too much money. Justin Simmons, whether it's because of the franchise tag, I have a feeling the Broncos are going to franchise to tag him again to give him that extra window to negotiate a long-term deal. Justin Simmons is going to be a Bronco for the long haul. But just as a contingency plan and also to upgrade the depth, I think that the Broncos need to go out and they need to draft a replacement guy, potentially for Justin Simmons, but more so for Kareem Jackson. Because as great as Kareem Jackson has been, he's expensive, he's aging, he had the suspension for the DUI last year, he's a ferocious tone setter for the defense, but also 2021 is his last season under contract with the Denver Broncos. The safety position, and then what they have PJ Locke, who's not the guy, Trey Marshall, who's been terrible. Outside of that, there's really no options on the Broncos. They went out and signed Will Parks to come and give him some more depth, and especially as a special teams player. Safety is a big need for this Broncos team as well, especially with what Vic Fangio wants his safeties to do within his defensive scheme. And I would be willing to bet the Broncos go on day 2 at least and go get a safety. And to me, that guy is Richie Grant. You want to talk about an aggressive tackler. You want to talk about a guy that is versatile in coverage. He can play in the box. He can drop back, play some free. He has some decent hands. I want to see some more awareness from him. He looks lost at times and gets himself out of position in coverage. So that's something that I think that it's a disciplinary thing to me. I think he wants to go and try to make the big play rather than hold true to his assignment, which in Vic Fangio's defense, that does not necessarily work. You have to be true to your assignments. But Richie Grant, as far as a scheme fit and what Vic Fangio really likes his players to do athletically and what they are capable of doing, Richie Grant's a perfect fit for this Broncos defense.
Richie Grant is a really good fit for him. Hamza Nasser El-Din, he's a really good fit for him. Trevin Moehrig, he could be a really good fit. I think he's much better as a single high, but he can be really effective in a two high. Caden Stearns, I think he's a good fit. James Wiggins, and Bubba Bolden. I think Bubba Bolden is Justin Simmons 2.0. Paris Ford, I mean, if you want to replace Kareem Jackson, look no further than Paris Ford, because Paris Ford is Kareem Jackson 2.0. Now, to get to this question from Base Case, $4.99 donation. Thank you, Base.
Thanks, Base.
Yeah, love the name, love the picture. Where does Mizzou Lock rank in this quarterback class? Not top 5. I'm not sure he's top 7.
I'm not sure if he's a second-round pick.
No, for me, he wouldn't be. For me, he'd be a third-round pick because of how many quarterbacks would be above him. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence, he's the top guy. I think Justin Fields, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, they're all above him. I think Desmond Ridder, I think Kyle Trask, and I would possibly even look at Mac Jones being over him. Mac Jones would be the one I'm hesitant on being there. So he might just be borderline top 7 for me. But yeah, I mean, he's not a top guy. I don't think he'd be a second round pick. So yeah, that's just where he is for me.
That's fair. I'm going to go back to the safety position here because I'm looking through some of the safeties that are on the free agent wire, and this safety free agent class is ridiculous, man. I'm telling you. Anthony Harris, obviously. Justin Simmons, obviously. But you look down the list a little bit. Jerron Harmon from the Lions is a pretty good player. Daniel Sorensen has had a lot of success with the Chiefs. But the one guy that I'm looking at here, Malik Hooker, who has not really lived up to his first-round draft status in the Colts, and they might be tired of him. And he might be going to look at a reclamation project, and guess what? Malik Hooker and Justin Simmons paired up in Vic Fangio's defense, you freaking bet, man. I'm telling you what, that's as athletic and as rangy as it gets. Malik Hooker can still slide down. He's a good hitter. He's a good tackler. I just don't think that with the injuries that he had and the way that he's been lackluster in that Colts defense, and they spent a first-round pick on him. He's never lived up to that hype. They might be looking to move forward and move on without Malik Hooker. If he comes a free agent, man, I want the Broncos to pounce on that. A 3-man rotation with Malik Hooker, Kareem Jackson, and Justin Simmons. Are you kidding me? Oh, man, that's tasty. I like that a lot.
So real quick before we get to talking about the Chiefs game, I saw a lot of talk about cornerbacks, and I just want to say this. I don't think cornerback is as great of a need as many others do. Not saying it's not a need at all. Not saying it's not a great one or not a big one. But the biggest thing is when you look at Vic Fangio and his history, there's one common thread when it comes to cornerbacks. He doesn't take the top guy. He just doesn't.
Yeah.
He looks for a guy who could be had a little bit later that is a perfect scheme fit. Michael Ojemudia.
Yep.
I mean, he has a history of doing this. The defensive backs he took in the first round in his career when he was a defensive coordinator were both guys who were hybrid players. Jimmy Ward and can't remember what the other guy's name is now. Erick Reed.
Yeah. Yep.
Were the two that he's taken. So I don't think that they go corner round 1. I could see it day 2. And there's plenty of guys there, but it's going to be somebody who's a scheme fit. It's going to be a guy who could play that off coverage, have good click and close, be able to be smart in his zone. JC Horn, he's competing for my top corner spot. He's not a scheme fit. Patrick Surtain, he's not a scheme fit. Caleb Farley of the top corners is the only scheme fit, but again, that would be required for Vic Fangio to go away from his trend of not going corners early. So I would be looking at somebody at least probably day 2, round 2, round 3, maybe a trade up into round 2, but it'd definitely be no later than round 5.
No, I feel you on that. What about your boy Shaun Wade?
Shaun Wade's had a rough year. I've heard a lot of talk that he can be a third-round pick because he's just been terrible on the outside as a boundary corner. And a lot of people felt that he could be a first-round pick compete for the top corner spot if he showed improvement there, if he showed he could belong there. But he's starting to show he's just kind of a nickel corner. That's about it. That's what he did well. And then you got to sit there and question is, with how bad he has been this year, is he broken? Can he be redeemed? Can he be the pieces put back together? Those are the questions.
Yeah. If Shaun Wade's available in the third round, you almost have to take that flyer on that, especially with the injury to Bryce Callahan right now, where he had a 3-year contract. So next year is going to be his last year in Denver. He has another foot injury. He's probably going to miss the rest of the season. Also, AJ Bouillon, what's his status? There's not a lot of guaranteed money, if any, on his contract. There's a restructure potentially going to happen there, but for the money that the Broncos paid him this year, all the injuries that he's had and not being available on the field, they could potentially move on from AJ Bouillon this coming off season as well. To me, cornerback is a big need, just because outside of those two guys, saying Bassey actually looks like a hit, depending on what you're actually doing with him. As a run filler, he's really good. In covers, there's still some issues. You did have that interception last week, right place, right time. So I could see them potentially moving forward with Aseng Bassey as a slot guy. I would rather him be a dime cornerback than a nickel cornerback. And if Shaun Wade is able to play in the slot and play as that nickel cornerback, you really can't ask for a better scheme fit there. With the Broncos having the need there, I could see that. I could see that working out. I really could see that working out. Who was it? I think it was Richie Rich that said that the rotation between Parks, Simmons, and Hooker would work out. Unfortunately, I don't think Will Parks is going to be around next year.
I don't know. I don't know. I think that he thought the grass was greener on the other side, so he took a chance. Shaq Barrett, this is the opposite side of what happened with Shaq Barrett, took a chance to compete to start, got hurt, had some issues, didn't fully click with the defense there, didn't fully click with picking up the defense. I think coming back, knowing Vic Fangio's defense, the fact that they wanted him back and everything, I think he has a good chance to stick around for the price, if the price is right. Now, before we get to talking about the Chiefs and jumping out of here, David Kilgore came in with the $4.99 donation, said, if Denver happens to lose out and gets a top 10 pick in the draft, where do you guys see us looking? If Denver loses out, then quarterback's obviously got to be up there, because that means that Drew Lock didn't show what he needed to show. I think Penei Sewell, I think he would be a big option up there, although I do have question about moving him or Bowles to the right side. I think Gregory Rousseau, I think that he would be an option if they're top 10, but if they lose out, there's a good chance they're looking at top 5. So, and I do think that if they lose out, then quarterback is going to be way up there.
Yeah, I firmly agree with that. And it goes back to the beginning of our conversation. If the Broncos do lose out, they're picking top 5, they're going to get a quarterback. Just plain and simple. You can't have another top 5 pick in the same decade and not go get a quarterback when you had the opportunity to go and get. Sure, hindsight is always 2020. They could have went and they could have got Josh Allen, they could have got Lamar Jackson, they could have drafted Josh Rosen as well. Like it doesn't matter. That's all in the past. If you get another top 5 pick and you know that you don't have a quarterback, because right now, if Drew Lock loses out, you know you don't have a quarterback, that's the guy you've got to go get. And then, in my opinion, that's where it should be. Kenneth Booker jumping in here with the $5 super. If Parks finishes well, should they drop Jackson and do a Parks and Simmons rotation? No. Will Parks, to me, is a rotational player. He's a really good dime backer. I like him in that role. He's not a starter capable player, and honestly, probably the better role that he has is that dime backer role, and as a high quality special teams player.
Yeah. So let's get out of here, but first let's talk about the Kansas City Chiefs. So Lance, how do you have this game going?
I have it ugly, man. Honestly, if I don't have it as ugly as you do, go to milehighhuddle.com, check out the Mile High Roundtable for all of our bold predictions and picks. But no, I have the Broncos losing. I think it was like 35 to 13 or something like that. The big keys to this game is fundamental football. Plain and simple. If you want to beat the Kansas City Chiefs, you have to play quality fundamental football. You have to be able to play with a quality running game on offense and defense. You have to stop the run and run the ball, maintain time of possession, and don't turn the football over. Well, the Broncos are the worst team in the NFL at sustained drives of 5 minutes or longer. They have the fewest of any team in the NFL this year. Their running game is hit or miss because it's unsustainable, because they fall back behind too early in games, and they end up having to either avoid the running game entirely, or it's ineffective, and they don't do what they need to do as far as protecting and creating holes and stuff like that outside of the Miami game. And also, I don't think Drew Lock is capable enough of playing a game without throwing an interception. And if you give the Chiefs an extra possession on that offense, they're going to run the score up on you. And I just don't think that the Broncos, while I would like to assume that they can remain competitive, I don't think they're going to. And they're going to get blown out again in Kansas City.
I think the issue is that the Kansas City Chiefs, they are the ones who released the blueprint for Lock. Tyrann Mathieu came out and said that if you show a single high safety, Drew Lock's going to throw it deep every single time. And that's been the case. When teams show a single high safety, Drew Lock's throwing it 20-plus yards downfield. I think the Chiefs are going to continue to exploit that. I hope that Lock and the Broncos will be smart enough to sit there and turn that against them. But we haven't seen Lock do haven't seen him play that kind of chess with defenses so far. So it'd be a first. I think the Chiefs last game, they scored 3 touchdowns by defense and special teams. That we didn't really need their offense to step up. And I think that their offense, especially with Bryce Callahan out, can just feast. There's no one to match up with Tyreek Hill. I have serious concerns about Travis Kelce. I don't have a good feeling about this one. I think that Drew Lock doesn't look terrible, but I don't think it looks great. I think that the offense as a whole ends up looking pretty bad. And I think the defense has a lot of issues with Bryce Callahan not in there.
Yeah. Yeah, then that's a fair point, because Bryce Callahan, being the fastest cornerback on the Broncos defense, was the guy that you wanted to see lined up against Tyreek Hill specifically. But it doesn't necessarily matter about Tyreek Hill only. Demarcus Robinson's pretty quick too. They've got Byron Pringle, who's pretty quick. I'm not sure the status of Sammy Watkins. I don't think he's actually available to play in this game, but still, there's a lot of speed on that defense, and you can't double cover Travis Kelce and double cover Tyreek Hill every single time. And if you're going to have a one-on-one matchup in the secondary at all, you want it to be Bryce Callahan and Tyreek Hill. And Bryce Callahan's not going to be able to play. So that's just all this doom and gloom. No, it's not really doom and gloom. It's being realistic.
Not everything is sunshine and rainbows with the Broncos.
No.
It's that simple. It's not.
I find myself saying this every single week. And
we do.
It's not that I want the Broncos to fail. It's not that I don't think that the Broncos are a good team. I love my Denver Broncos. In fact, I'm wearing a Broncos hoodie right now. I've got a Broncos tattoo coming here soon. Like, I've already got plans. I got to try to figure out a tattoo artist that actually wants to be able to, or is going to be open for me to be able to go and get it. I have a Broncos tattoo design ready to go. Like, the Broncos are my lifeblood. It's why I do this. I also think that it's okay for you to be a fan and also be objective in your analysis. And as Robert Skinner comes in and says, the Broncos are depressing right now. They're not playing good football. It's exactly NorCal coming in here. Being realistic isn't a crime. It's not. We're being realistic, and it is what it is. So sorry about that. We have always prided ourselves, the Valley Deep Divers, on bringing you real, fair, and critical analysis when it's necessary. We don't sugarcoat things. We don't make it sound all EDJ. You don't deserve to have a Broncos tattoo, Lance. It's coming. I'm telling you, it's coming.
And I just want to say this. It's like, let me see here. Even the tone of your voice is depressing. So doing videos for Mile High Huddle, one thing that I have to do, and it comes off onto the pod, is I have to make the tone of my voice reflect the mood that I have with what I'm saying. So when I'm talking bad about the Broncos, it's just become a natural habit of mine for it to sound depressing, downer, because I want that to be pushed out there. So that's all it is. And it's not that, and I think it was James who came out and said that we will gladly be wrong if the Broncos beat the Chiefs with our prediction, and that is 100% spot on. If I ever pick the Broncos to lose, I will happily eat crow if the Broncos end up winning.
Yep. I live in Oakland, so eating crow is just the worst around here. But yeah, that's true. We got a Bills fan in the stream. I want to say what's up to Joey Reed here. He says Bills fan here, but damn, I didn't even know you guys had a live stream. Well, welcome to the show, Joey. We appreciate you for joining us, even though you don't necessarily follow the content and what we do here. Thanks for joining in. We appreciate that.
And go Bills. It'll be nice to finally see another division winner besides the freaking Patriots.
Josh Allen is my dude, man. I live in Wyoming, and that was my guy. I watched Josh Allen multiple times at the University of Wyoming, and I thought that despite the accuracy issues, and that was a big thing with me, was the accuracy issues. They were also accentuated by terrible receivers as well that dropped a lot of passes. But at the same time, I thought Josh Allen actually had some pretty good tools to work with, and I'm impressed to see the development come with him. I really do. Go Bills, except for when we play them here in a couple weeks. Joey, come back and check us out. What is it, next week or the week after? That the Broncos play the Bills?
I think it's 2 weeks.
I think it's 2 weeks from now. The Broncos play the Bills.
I think it's
come back, check us out.
Panthers and the Bills.
Come back, check us out, and see if we know what we actually are talking about. But anyways, guys, we are now 9 minutes over.
Real quick, I would just want to say it's like, aren't the Bills one of those teams that, like, I don't want to say you're a fan of outside of those who are actually a fan of the team, but unless they're playing your team, you just kind of root for them.
Yeah,
are they like that for you? They are for me.
Uh-huh.
Like, I always just find myself, no matter who they're playing besides the Broncos, I find myself rooting for the Bills. Always have, really. Them and the Ravens. Those are two teams, and I know a lot of people are going to have an issue with the Ravens, but there are some personal reasons there that I can't really get into. But
I know those personal reasons. No, for me, the Bills are up there, and honestly, the Saints. I love Drew Brees, so I will always root for the Saints and root for Drew Brees to do well. It's unfortunate that he's hurt right now, and I didn't get to watch him play against the Broncos last week. But anyways, let's
just forget that game.
Yeah,
you had to mention that game this week, didn't you?
I mentioned it a couple times.
I had to watch that game like 5 times over for my grades, and it's like ingrained in my head, and it was just such a terrible game. But I think. Hat tip, round of applause for Kendall Hinton.
Yeah, round of applause for Kendall Hinton, and I can't believe that I shouldn't say this. I'm going to anyways. I can't believe some people were made some boneheaded mistakes is the thing that I will say that. And no, Bama, I do want to say this. This is the biggest point that I've wanted to put out there, and I was waiting for this opportunity to do it, and I'm glad you reminded me. You burned the tape, LOL. No, you don't burn that tape. You want to know why?
You burn this tape.
No, you want to know why you don't burn that tape, and I will stand on this hill and die if I have to. I will die if I have to. That tape right there, that tape right there is something you show to every young player coming up, and you say that no matter what, this organization will not quit. We went out there.
You don't
and
need
played
to do
a
that
game.
with the tape. You can just tell the story.
But no, you show it to them, and you show them the way that defense played, and you show them the way that the offensive line tried to play. I understand that. I get it. But you make that example and you say, this is the lowest of the low. And look at how this team did not quit. And look at how we all came together and we all came and rallied around our guy, number 2, Kendall Hinton. And that's like, sure, it's ugly tape and you don't want to necessarily make an example out of it. But that's if you're going to make an example, if you're going to use it for anything, that is it.
At the very least. You said it in a very special spot, like 6 feet underground. And
No. Don't throw it away, though. Don't throw it away. There's something. There's something to work with.
All right, guys, we got to get out of here.
Yeah, we got to get out of here, guys. Thank you all for joining the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. As it says up on the screen here, subscribe wherever you guys are watching this, whether it's YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch. It doesn't matter. Subscribe to Mile High Huddle. Like every video you guys see, and if you love it, share it. Share it out to everybody in Broncos country. Get like-minded Broncos fans like you, like me and Eric, to come in and join in on this. Help us grow. It helps a lot. While you guys are out there clicking on buttons, make sure you click the follow button on at @DVDD_pod. It's the easiest way to keep up with what's going on with the Dove Valley Deep Divers. Also, at Mile High Huddle to follow your favorite Mile High Huddle personalities like me and Eric. Also, Nick and Carl, James as well. James Campbell in the chat tonight. Shout out to James. At John K MHH. Shout out to John for running the keyboard behind the scenes. We appreciate you, big John.
Round of applause for John.
Yeah, let's please do. Thank you, John. We appreciate everything you do.
How appreciated he is by everybody here.
Yeah. Facebook users, become a supporter. Click that blue become a supporter button on facebook.com/Mile High Huddle. Again, that's a great way to show your love and support for the show. Head on over to sportsbetting.com. Take advantage, or sportsbetting.com/Mile High Huddle. Take advantage of that risk-free week of sports betting. And also hit the merch tent, guys. Like I said, I'm a concert junkie and not a get your swag on kind of a guy. Go get your merch, get yourself a hat or a t-shirt, something like that, whatever suits your fancy. Why are our Twitter handles not on our names? Anyways, you guys find me at Sanderson MHH, for Eric at Erick Trickel. Before we get out of here, Eric, I got to ask, as I always do, Any last words?
Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
I can make up words too. Okay, I can make up words too. All righty, guys.
No, actually, Richie Rich said, guys, we need to talk about running back next time, please. I'm actually trying to get a good friend of the podcast, Lance Bullglaze, to join us and talk running backs.
Yeah.
Might not happen for a while, but definitely trying to get him on.
Yeah. Love Luke. I love to be able to listen to him. That guy, being a coach and being in it, is just an amazing person to talk to.
Oh, yeah, I guess I should stop that. If you guys don't know who Luke Bullglaze is, he's a college coach for running backs.
Yeah, and was a former wide receivers coach as well, I believe.
Wide receiver coach as well.
Yeah. So, but anyways, guys, for Eric, I'm Lance. Thank you all for joining the Dove Valley Deep Divers. You guys stay safe this weekend. Take care. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend. And as always, go Broncos. We'll see you guys next week. Same time, same place.